Hi everyone, welcome to lecture 16. In this lecture, we're going to talk about intellectual disability and public policy in education. In the first part of this lecture, we're going to talk about public policy specifically and how public policy helps evolve our understanding of disabilities, specifically intellectual disability, and how there are certain interactive relationships between public policy and practice, and how things can get better for the population that we've been talking about. In the second part of this lecture, we're going to talk specifically about education and about, we'll look at some court cases and look through history about what's kind of happened and laid the groundwork for systems change and for individuals with disabilities and intellectual disabilities in the field of education. We'll talk a little bit also about special education, individualized education plans, and just some important considerations for educating individuals with intellectual disability. So first, we're going to talk about the interactive relationship between public policy and practice. So there are many things that go into systems change as a whole and making things better. And the first one is social and political movements. So when we're talking about social and political movements, we're talking about the civil rights movement, normalization, deinstitutionalization, self-advocacy for individuals with intellectual disability. We talked way back in Module 1 about how the civil rights movement really helped lay the groundwork for making things better for individuals with disabilities. And we talked about Brown versus Board of Education. And while that's wasn't a case specifically pertaining to individuals with intellectual disability, it really helped lay some groundwork for making things better for individuals with disabilities. And then after we have social and political movements, we have to look at attitudinal changes. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about how society perceives disability. And this results from social and political movements. And once attitudes start to change, we can start to see some judicial decisions. And we'll get into those things a little bit, specifically as they relate to education in the second part of this lecture. And then some other cases we've already talked about, and we'll talk about some more in subsequent lectures. But what these judicial decisions do is help legislate kind of the bare minimum, what we have to provide either educationally, in the public sector, for housing. We'll talk about the Atkins decision in a couple of weeks, or in about a week, and how that judicial system really helped move things forward for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Statutory changes, these arise from judicial decisions. So these are actual pieces of law that go into effect. So like the Americans with Disabilities Act, IDEA, all of those things resulted from judicial decisions that were made. When we're looking at how participatory and research evaluation plays a role in public policy and practice, the movement towards including people with intellectual disabilities and their families in the evaluation of outcomes, again, really helps move us forward in making things better for our population. And then lastly, advances in research regarding the nature of the disability. This leads to more successful intervention and hopefully specifically evidence-based interventions for our population, and helps improve our expectations of this population. So when we're looking about this interactive relationship, I really want you guys to think, as I'm going through some of this, I want you guys to kind of reflect on where you think you fall. Where can you help affect this relationship or help with change? Just by taking this class, how does your knowledge and information about individuals with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities help impact this interactive relationship? And so what we're looking here first is we need to look at the inputs. So what are the social factors, disability policy, and our change in conceptualization of disability? How does that help inform public policy? And public policy are rules, regulations, statutes, and how funding is allocated. These inputs help directly affect public policy, which then helps inform our practice, which is, our practice when working with individuals with intellectual disability. That can involve diagnosis, classification, and also help inform the design and delivery of supports that we give to our population. And then here we have outcomes. And this is kind of what we're looking for. This is why we do all of this. And we look at this at a personal, family, societal, and a whole overall systems change outcome level, which we'll talk about. So as our understanding of disability changes, our core principles change and have a direct impact on public policy and practice, which then subsequently affect our outcomes. For example, the focus on individual choice and control has led to the implementation of self-determination and taking self-determination into consideration when we're designing supports. And so when you look here at this, public policy and practice directly and continuously inform each other. So different inputs on, social factors, like I mentioned, disability policy and changing of how we conceptualize and understanding disability inform public policy and practice. And then in practice, what we do is we learn more about what's best for our population, which then also helps inform public policy. And then the overall outcome is an increase on the personal level, family, societal, and overall systems change outcome. And that's our goal. We want things to get better for individuals with intellectual disabilities, and we want overall change on a system-wide level. So make sure you guys have a really good understanding of this interactive relationship between public policy and practice and how they directly inform one another to increase, to have desirable outcomes and make things better for individuals with disability. So when we're looking at what are our desired policy outcomes, the first one are rights. So, and this is, again, just basic human rights like respect and dignity, and legal rights like right to due process or access to things that individuals with disabilities or without disabilities do have. We also have participation as a desired personal outcome. And this is just being able to participate in their community, with their families, and also contribute to their community and contribute to their families. Self-determination, which we've talked a lot about already, this is really, really important, and this has to do with choices, decisions, having options, and personal control and autonomy over supports, their life, their participation, everything that they're, that goes into their support planning. When we're thinking about physical well-being, this is health status, activities of daily living, leisure, recreation. Our material well-being, this refers to financial and employment status. Do we have access to employment opportunities that our non-disabled peers also have, which then again in turn allows us to make money, and then we can have access to goods that we want. Societal inclusion, this one refers to our living status. Do we have to live in a more segregated, type of setting? Do individuals with disabilities have to go to different schools or use different engage in different activities or different community centers or different types of jobs? The goal here is for them to be included in society to the greatest extent possible as their non-disabled peers. When we're looking at emotional well-being, are individuals free from abuse and neglect? Do they have friends? Do they, have the ability to engage in meaningful relationships, maybe romantic relationships? Do they have a sense of overall security and friends and caring relationships? And then personal development. How are we with access to education and education level, their education environment, the ability to demonstrate their competencies and better themselves, maybe even go to college, which we've talked about. But these outline all of the different types of personal outcomes that we're looking for when we're looking at that interactive relationship between public policy and practice, when we're looking at personal outcomes. And then when you looked back at that graphic, it talked about family outcomes. So one way to measure family outcomes is looking at family interaction. Is a family able to spend time together, talk openly, and be supportive of one another? When we're thinking about parenting, does the individual have the ability to have children and engage in parenting? Are parents of individuals with intellectual disability able to help their children, teach their children, take care of their individual needs? Our emotional well-being, this again plays into having friends that provide support and allowing an individual to have time to pursue their interests and feel safe. Personal development, this is looking at the opportunities for continuing education, the employment status of parents, the educational level of family members as a whole. Physical well-being on a family outcome level looks at access to medical and dental care, recreation, and leisure access. When we're looking at financial well-being, this is looking at, transportation. Does the family have access to transportation to certain appointments? Are they able to navigate their community? Are they able to, still gain just as much family income as a family without a child or a family member with an intellectual disability? Community involvement looks at community activities, membership in groups, and then disability-related supports. Does the family have support for their child and for themselves in their school, in their workplace, in their home, with their friends? This is really important, again, when we're looking at some of those websites like the Down syndrome website. And, next week we'll look more at Fragile X and Prouder Willie and some of those other things. Again, pay attention to what those support groups look like on those websites for families as a whole. When we're looking at social outcomes, we're looking at our ways to indicate whether or not we're doing what we need to do from a public policy perspective. We look at SES position or socioeconomics position, and that encompasses our education, our occupation, and our income. Health, again, our longevity, our wellness, our access to healthcare, and then our overall just subjective well-being. So our life satisfaction, our positive affect, making sure that overall these things are taken care of. And again, remember, our ultimate goal is systems change. And this is the focus on our outcomes that reflects the movement away from diagnosis and classification to our increased focus on the planning for individualized supports, moving again more from away from more of a medical model to more of a person-centered model and understanding the individual and their family unit and making things better as a whole. I encourage you guys to go to this website here. And what this website does is it looks at all of different states, and it looks again across all of those core indicators: personal outcomes, family outcomes, societal, and overall systems change outcomes for individuals with developmental disabilities across different states. And it sends out questionnaires frequently that asks about how much people with disabilities are able to participate in community events, have access to healthcare, dental care, how well they're able to engage in meaningful family relationships, and what level of support is needed. But these national core indicators really tell us how we're doing on a state-by-state level at overall allowing systems change to happen for individuals with disabilities. So when we're looking at the factors that really can help impacting outcomes, it's important to look at it on multiple different levels. And first here we have the micro, more at the micro level. And this is specifically referring to an individual's family, peers, their school, their church, things that are very, very close, again, within their household and in their very, very immediate community that really can help impact and how things are doing there. And if things are doing well there, how are they informing other pieces of maybe the meso or the exosystem, or more on a macro level to make things better overall for all individuals with intellectual disabilities. And it's really important here to understand, again, how our inputs and how our outcomes help inform this entire system. We know that inputs, again, are those social factors, those core concepts of disability policy, how our changing conceptualization of disability, that really helps inform things at each of these levels. And then we get outcomes, and depending on how good or not good those outcomes are, they can help better inform things as well, and they can become inputs to make system change happen as a whole. Also, along the outside of here, and in your book, this graphic is a little bit different. It has a chronosystem. And the chronosystem refers to the evaluation and evolution of external systems over time. So how well does this system do as a whole over time, depending on various inputs and outcomes for individuals with disabilities? So again, just important to understand all of these different things that are operating around and within an individual with a disability that help inform how things can get better or maybe not better for that person on a micro or a more of a macro level. So while we're talking about systems change, I want to take some time just to bring to your attention person first language. And this has been brought up, in some discussion posts here and there, but person first language is a movement where when you're referring to an individual with a disability, you say, for example, an individual with an autism spectrum disorder as opposed to an autistic person. And there are some really interesting viewpoints that have come out recently about person first language. And some folks feel as though it's maybe not as appropriate as others would argue that it is. And so I want you just to take some time just to think about this. And this was recently brought to my attention, and I thought it was really interesting. So, for example, would I refer to someone as being a female or a female person or a person of female gender? And some people will argue, again, if you use the same logic with someone with a disability, so saying someone and is an individual with a disability versus a disabled person, it takes away the ownership of the disability. And so saying someone is a person of a female gender sounds a little funny, as opposed to a female person. But this here is using person first language, so it's putting the person first. So again, when I mentioned that someone is a Canadian person or a person born of the nation of Canada, should I refer to Mr. Smith as Smith, whom is a Mr., and so on and so forth. And I think I'm going to put up on the course website for you guys a couple different articles that have a really good dialogue about this. And you guys will have an extra credit opportunity attached to it. And I think the bottom line is I'm not sure exactly what is right or wrong. Whenever you're in these types of situations as to, should I refer to someone, as an individual with a disability or a disabled person, I always like to err on the side of asking the person themselves. What did they prefer to be called? I think you kind of can't go wrong with there. And I don't think there is a right or wrong reason. And it's not that having these conversations are meant to be divisive and the outcome being a right or wrong answer, but rather continue a dialogue. And that's how systems change happen, being open-minded to maybe some differing viewpoints and thinking about things a little bit differently. When this was brought to my attention, initially I was like, oh man, I didn't, and then when it was put in these ways that I have these questions here, I was like, wow, I never really thought about that, calling, I'm a female. So saying I'm a person of a female gender sounds, to me, I'd prefer to be called a female because that's part of me and my identity. Just like some people with a disability may prefer to be called a disabled person, but others maybe prefer to be called a person with a disability. So the bottom line is just, I think, again, just to continue to educate ourselves and open our minds. And that's really that's how systems change happens. And so kind of going back again to I'm going to take you guys back a little bit here. Looking at this relationship here, and when I put this graphic up initially, I asked you guys, where do you guys think you fall into this? And where can you affect this relationship? Where do you fall into here? And so I think understanding different perspectives, like, the use or maybe non-use of person-first language, for example, that's the first step. And being willing to learn more about it, that's why you guys are also in this class. That's how we can get our ultimate goal of systems change and making things better for individuals with disabilities. So again, I'm going to have an extra credit opportunity available for you guys just to read a couple different articles that are one that's pro person first and one that makes the argument that maybe person first language maybe isn't appropriate. And then just, allow you guys to react to that. And based on everything that you guys have learned thus far, just kind of let me know what you guys think. Again, I'm not saying one is right or wrong, and people certainly make mistakes sometimes, and may use non-person first language. But again, the bottom line, I think the take-home message is there is no right or wrong. It's just asking people and educating yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed this first part of intellectual disability, looking at public policy and education. Part 2, we're going to look specifically at education and how we've really seen a lot of changes in education and how we educate individuals with intellectual disability. Let me know if you have any questions, and look out for that extra credit opportunity. Thanks.